some epic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Smoking Studios here for another live event show. Let me start that over. I always butcher these things. I get so nervous. I'm actually a little nervous for this one, right? This is kind of like the principle of the cigar industry that we have on. Like if anybody's gonna slap like an Adam Silver to the NBA, you know. So it's a little nerve-wracking. But anyways, welcome back to the Smoking Studios for another live episode of the Rocky Mountain Cigar Show. So happy to have everybody coming back for another weekly show here. Super excited to have Josh on. I'm not even gonna attempt his last name. I had to look for additional letters on my keyboard to spell it. So we'll let him say his last name, as I just don't like butchering people's names. But some quick little show maintenance here. Everyone's gifts are out. If you won a gift for my 40th birthday show, they are officially out in the mail. Shipped them, I think, 2 days ago or yesterday or something. And so you should be receiving all of those if you are on the list to get them. And again, everybody watching the show tonight, thank you so much for tuning in. It is because of you guys that I even have an opportunity to do this. And as you can tell, I kind of just have fun with this show. It's not a really rigid show. It's more or less a discussion. We're going to have an absolutely fantastic discussion tonight. I do have some things prepared, which is a little bit out of the usual for the show, but just because I have things prepared doesn't mean we're going to get to everything nor talk about everything. But what we are going to do is go ahead and bring in Josh right now. How you doing, brother?
How you doing, Ryan? Thank you for having me on the show. Very excited.
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for finding time to come on. You are one busy individual. You are also, for being so young, so accomplished in your career. You're a professor. You very accomplished inside Washington D.C. circuit for various groups. You had your own lounges, like you had told me pre-show. So, what I want to do here is, before we jump into the "What Are You Smoking Tonight" segment, what I'd like to do is have you introduce yourself really quickly and give us a little bit of your background and kind of start that walking up into how you even got connected to PCA.
Yeah, so I really appreciate it. I'm Joshua Habursky, the executive director of the Premium Cigar Association. I've been with the association for the last 6 years. This is my first year anniversary as the executive director. I previously was the head of government affairs for 5 years and was a contractor for a year before that. I came to DC about a dozen years ago, and that was really to go to grad school in Georgetown. I've been working for trade associations and nonprofits as a lobbyist, as an advocate, all throughout that. And originally wanted to be a political history professor. And as Ryan mentioned, I teach at George Washington University on the side. Actually getting ready to do, started my course last night for the summer semester in the evenings for grad students. We have a ton of military fellows in the class. So that's one of the outlets beyond smoking cigars that I enjoy.
Now, I want to kind of start with your journey, and we'll back up and kind of back ourselves into that here. But what I want to do real quick is go ahead and kick off the "What Are You Smoking Tonight" segment, sponsored by Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust. Thank you so much, Steve. So, Josh, as you're the guest of the show tonight, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Yeah, so I got 2 cigars lined up for tonight. I'm gonna, do the show and then quickly get out to my patio and have a cigar. Um, the Kristoff Signature Series, the PCA release. It was released at this year's trade show. I've smoked one of these before. This is my second one. It aged a little bit in the humidor, so ready for that. And then I've been smoking these. I bought a bundle of them, and I think I'm only down to like 4 or 5 left. The new Tatuaje pork tenderloin, and I think this is an amazing cigar.
I have not had the tenderloin yet, but I look very forward to hopefully trying it. What I am smoking tonight, everybody, is The how you like the new thing? So I'm kind of putting up a new little thing, trying to beautify the show a little bit, bringing a little bit more interactiveness to it. So I am smoking the King of Clowns, which you can go and pick up at smokin.com right now. And it is a Mexican San Andreas Maduro wrapper with a Dominican binder and a secret clown shit filler. I can tell you it's the clown shit filler that makes it much better. That's how you know it's really good. The secret's just they just can't disclose it. So if you have not tried one of these cigars yet, have you had one of these yet? The King of
I have
Clowns?
not. No,
Have
I'm
you?
gonna have to get one.
Yeah, they're really good. Really well balanced. I would say medium profile, at least for mine. Might be medium to full for some, but well, thank you so much, Steve Sock, for sponsoring the "What Are You Smoking Tonight" segment of the show. Really, the only segment that we do. So back to it. All right. So let's start with the fact that um, you had mentioned a little bit ago that you started as a consultant with PCA. Well, you've transitioned now to the executive director or ED. What's one of the biggest leadership lessons that you've had to learn navigating this shift, and kind of how has it reshaped the approach that you had prior as a consultant slash in-house to now ED, to kind of the diverse membership of retailers, manufacturers, and other distributors that now you actually have to oversee on a closer level as ED?
Yeah, I enjoy this new role immensely. It was as a change of pace. As a lobbyist or as a consultant, you're firing at things constantly. You're trying to prevent bad legislation, bad regulations. I still do that in my current role, but I've had kind of the builder and communicator portion of my skill set. And I think the biggest lesson learned and the great thing that has happened over the past year in this new role is working with the full team of PCA. I can't do everything myself, and being able to delegate, being able to get member feedback. And I think I've developed a strong sense of diplomacy. I mean, there's not always going to be agreement. I love our membership. I'm a consumer first, so I've been in cigar lounges complaining about things, and this needs to change, this needs to happen. So a lot of times, when I'm traveling, whether it's for work or for personal, I will go into shops unannounced, not tell people who I am, and just start shooting the shit, so to speak. And then eventually I will say, hey, I'm Joshua Habursky with the Premium Cigar Association. And that's been great because I'm getting very organic feedback, raw. Sometimes people are like, oh, PCA needs to change this, change that. And we're taking a lot of initiative and making those changes on very quickly. It's been kind of a rapid expansion with membership and new programs, and I've been enjoying every minute of it. I was in New York for a meeting, and we had a couple hours before the train back to DC. We were up and back same day, and I went into Martinez Cigars, and we just sat there for 3 hours talking to customers with the owner, who's an exhibitor and a retailer, and their story, and hearing about their cigars. And I think that makes me better equipped for a long-term career in this role. When I interviewed for it, I said, look, I'm not going to be somebody that's jumping around. I had my dream job in government affairs, and I have my dream job plus now leading the premium cigar industry. PCA is the epicenter of the premium cigar industry, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to lead it.
So, what has been an operational hurdle that, because my assumption is, somebody that's been a business consultant for a long time, when new leadership comes in, there's a little bit of house cleaning potentially. There's a little bit of policy changes, updates, so on and so forth, streamlining of this, that, and the other. So, what has been an operational hurdle that you've had to fix, adjust, remake, rebrand? In old leadership, an old ED executive director versus kind of how you're running things. And boy, I just want to point out, guys, now he's literally the youngest executive director of the PCA by probably 20 to 30 years. So it means a lot, I think, for a younger generation of cigar smokers coming up to have a younger person at that helm, because it's a different way of thought. It's not that we did this for the last 30 years, last 20 years. So kind of talk us through that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, yeah, I come with a fresh perspective, but an appetite to learn and a deep respect for the tradition and the legacy of the industry. Starting with that, I immersed myself in the cigar culture over the past 6 years. I just got back from Honduras last week. Like, I have gone to the fields and the factories and got into the minute details. So having an understanding, I will never be an expert master blender, master craftsman, roller, but I kind of understand the 101 version of that. And I think that makes it a little bit easier to identify new priorities for the association. And, I work with Scott Pierce, who was the former executive director for 5 years. He had different priorities, just like I have different priorities. And, I made some quick changes with things, streamlining programs and processes. We made an additional hire in the trade show. We spent more money on the trade show, investing in it to build an overall better experience. I had gone to Pro Cigar and Pro Sabor, and they had these amazing parties. And I'm like, we need to start recognizing that the US is the largest consumer market and retail market of premium cigars in the world.
By
Full
far.
stop.
By
By
far.
far, 500 million cigars a year. So we need to take pride in it. Like, we might not be able to throw a party quite like Pro Cigar or Pro Sabor, but we can do better. So we spent the money and we ended up raising more money from that. So sponsorship went up. We had 70 plus new exhibitors at the trade show. 6,000 people versus 5,200 in Vegas. Everyone was, concerned. No one's going to come to New Orleans. You can't smoke anywhere. And we kind of just took things head on. People talked about the Circle Bar experience in Vegas. Well, we rented out 2 large venues to create that experience every single night. And we had hundreds of people participate every single night. The whole not smoking in New Orleans thing, it's kind of comical at this point, because we had the governor of Louisiana come on stage and light up a cigar the first day. And Louisiana and New Orleans has completely embraced our show.
They're a
Last
big pipe tobacco state too. I mean, you got Perique. Like, there's a extensive tobacco history in the state of Louisiana.
Absolutely. And, the city of New Orleans, with some of their restrictions, have been previously a pain, but like, the convention center is state run. The state government has been very helpful. The legislature just passed a tax cap on premium cigars for their market. And I'm sure that that has something to do with the success and the money that the trade show brought to the city of New Orleans and the surrounding areas. So, I think attacking the problems head on. I created 4 subcommittees with our board, and we had our first organizational meeting today of those subcommittees: technology, education, international, and our new alliance membership. And on one of our board members, executive committee member, was like, I've been participating in the association for many years now, been on the board many years. And he's like, this is the first time that we have a sense of not being on the defensive. And that's something that I think my advocacy background has brought to this table. I'm unashamed. When I'm doing virtual meetings, with legislators, with the FDA, I'm smoking a cigar on screen. Like, it's one of those things where I'm not going to shy away. I take pride in the industry. I think anyone that's a retailer or manufacturer, that they are quintessential small businesses and should be celebrated and not portrayed as villains.
But I think where you have a lot going too is, again, I go back to your age. You're The generation, you're a few years younger than me. I'm just saying a few years, all right? I'm much older than he is, but he's a few years younger than me. Uh, but again, I go back to that because I work with a lot of generational companies. And I work with a lot of companies that say, oh, we can do X, Y, or Z when X, Y, or Z person leaves. They have an old style mindset, or they have a reason for not doing it because of something that happened 20 years ago and they stubbed their toe and it was a bad omen or something like that. So, how do you bring more of a youthful, and I say youthful because I don't think you would disagree with me, for a long time, the PCA was run by heavy industry insides, other manufacturers and stuff, and can kind of make some of the other people feel a little smaller. But I think one of the things that I was happy with you coming in is instantly was just a new mindset, a new understanding of marketing, a new understanding of how to promote. And so kind of walk us through one of the changes that you had said you had made several, but one of the biggest changes from, I'm just going to say, the old guard to your guard.
Yeah, I think it's the frequency of communication. And I did our government affairs communication before this role. Now it's kind of overseeing all of it. And I like to think that it's a little bit like air traffic control, making sure we can land all of the information and communicating to a variety of different audiences. I'm meeting with lawmakers in the morning, meeting with manufacturers in the afternoon, and getting a call from one of our retailers or one of our board members. I think it's a perfect balance and combination. We have people on our board that have 30, 40 years experience in the cigar industry, that where I lack any of that, I have resources and I'm not uncomfortable asking for assistance or asking for help.
You also make up where they lack, and I think that's super important. You
Yeah,
make up when the modern approaches to the modern business ideas and concepts. And
yeah,
I think that's honest.
yeah. I think it's there's a level of aggressiveness and swagger that I
He's
think comes with.
very good at his political answers, guys. All right, I'll say it. I'll say it. This is super good for the PCA.
I appreciate that. No, it's been a good balance. Keeping me in check, and we have a
Oh,
lot of
we'll
crazy
do that.
ideas, and it's like we want to make sure that we're accountable and like we're doing things responsibly, and new programs. We're having a big release coming out in the next few weeks, where for the first time there will be a education program where people will be able to take a marketing class on cigars at a university. So, like, for the longest time, people were afraid that this wouldn't be able to take place. It's the tobacco word. It's a pariah, and it can't hurt to ask. And I think my point in saying is it I'm not afraid to ask for help, and I'm not afraid to ask for something and get a no on things. So we're going to try a lot of new things. One of the new things we have coming up in November, we're a partner in a trade show in Dubai. Brand new. It's an exciting adventure, and kind of speaks to your point of a fresh perspective going in, and I'm making sure that the association will be around for decades from a financial perspective. Our war chest has been growing. I mean, certainly we'll have challenges. We've sued the FDA 3 times, won all 3 times. Chances are in the next 5 years or 10 years, we're going to have another lawsuit. And if that comes to fruition, then we will be prepared from a financial perspective. So I need to build an army of consumers, retailers, manufacturers, be a cheerleader to energize them with the association, provide some of the best practices in education, but also maintain the association and build that war chest.
So I agree with you. I think your next fight's a lot sooner than 5 to 10 years, and I think you genuinely think that too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just kind of going into it, you guys have scored major wins, the FDA deeming rule vacator. Um, but, you know, from what I hear and from what I read, is some people still feel that there's maybe a pace of progress that's a little too slow for the state side of the bans, not the federal side, but the state side. And listen, we understand that, you know, it's hard to deal with 50 states plus the federal government with the, you know, that's a fucking massive octopus
Yeah.
of arms and bullshit you have to dive through. But how do you respond to those that say you guys aren't moving fast enough for state?
Yeah, you know, I think the challenge is the resources. I mean, we have one state director and one outside consultant to manage all 50 states. So we do the grassroots alerts. A lot of it is the need for additional participation of retailers. You know, one of the things that we're working on right now in moving from Las Vegas to New Orleans for the trade show, I mentioned we had a big jump in membership.
Big time.
250 new retailers, but we actually lost membership in California. California has the next big fight that we're talking about in the immediate future in a registry list of non-flavored tobacco. And this could be anywhere from up to $1,000 per SKU. So, you know, it becomes one of those things. How do we as an association devote $100,000, $200,000 to a
It's a
legal
lot.
fight when there's not the membership to pull from there? And fortunately, we've been working with a lot of partners in the state. We did a call with the Attorney General's office. We've worked with major distributors like Cretech and Phillips and King. But we need every retailer. Just because you can't make the trade show doesn't mean that you should lapse your membership. You know, it's kind of like insurance. You know, you don't cancel your policy if you don't have a claim. It needs to be constant. And, you know, the trade show, yes, it's the golden ticket. It's the Super Bowl for the cigar industry. And we're going to do everything that we can to make it that. But, you know, the $600 for a single store retailer, we need that. And we need their support if we're going to have a 50 state rapid response. We send out the action alerts. You know, we get a variety of different participation in different states. You know, we've had some wins, we've had some losses this year. You know, previously we had a 5-year run of no tax increases at the state and federal level. Indiana broke it, and then Illinois followed suit. So we have
Colorado did too.
So Colorado, I think, was a localized thing, and it didn't apply to all categories. So
yes.
Their tax rate is not legislative. So they actually tweak their rate as part of a regulation. So
correct.
You know,
correct.
From the legislative side, there were no new tax increases passed other than Indiana and Illinois. We're very worried about Ohio right now. So, you know, we're pouring resources there. Delaware just introduced a bill to increase taxes. So, you know, our team's on standby to go to Delaware and Dover to testify against that. You know, so that's those 3 people we're trying to cover as much. You know, there's industry partners out there like CAA and CRA. They're involved at the state level as well. CRA on the consumer side and some of the family-owned manufacturers. And then CAA is the larger manufacturers, and they have, I believe, a network of 45 lobbyists. So we work with them in getting the information and pushing back. But some of these losses that I mentioned and where it might feel as though things aren't moving as quick as possible, the big tobacco, the cigarette companies, the vapor companies, they're losing out on this as well. So if our small cottage industry, small nonprofit, a microcosm isn't able to get it done, we're up against bigger forces. And there'll be ways to rectify this, and political headwinds change frequently. So we'll be prepared with that, and we'll do assessments. But recently we're funding a study with CAA on tax caps in general to get better data. So when we go and we push back on some of those things, we'll have the material ready to rock.
You've talked about emphasizing in the cigar industry, being united. You actually are cited. You've cited Patrick Henry's "United We Stand, Divided We Fall." So, what specific steps are the PCA, you as ED, taking now to bridge uh, any sort of factions or fractionalism between retailers, manufacturers, consumers, and kind of what has been a big pushback you faced in that?
Yeah, there's always some disagreements in ways that you communicate to the different groups. We digitized all of our communications, so if you want to look at our magazine, it's public. We send a printed version. We have an alliance membership, so if you're an individual, you can sign up for the PCA. It's $99, and you'll get our magazine, as well as all of our other member benefits, other than access to the trade show, because that is an industry event. But we will get some differences in how we communicate to each of the groups. There's not so much friction between retailer and manufacturer. Maybe when I first started, I think it was always like brick and mortar versus online, and
Yes,
there's still some of that. However, over COVID, you had a big change where a lot of brick and mortar established online
but
stores,
they still have
uh,
brick and mortar, and I
and they
think
still,
that's the
yeah.
differentiator.
So, I think one of the things is that there's a place and there's a vertical for different channels. I think that, a brick and mortar offers an experience, a sense of community that, can't be completely replicated on the online front, but online serves an important purpose. So I think the change for me, at least, even where there is those disagreements, I'm not throwing stones at the other side. Like, the PCA wants to have everybody in the industry participate in our show, participate as a member. Our focal point is brick and mortar. That's been the history. We're, I think, 96 years old as an association, long-standing brick and mortar centric, but we added associate members, manufacturers, and distributors to our board of directors. So they're also represented in setting the strategic vision for the organization, working with me. So I'm getting that input. So there's not really the friction between retailer and manufacturer. There's differences and you may read about it in some of the other industry publications, of what is and what is not a premium cigar. One
Yes.
of the things that I have said from the start is we want to protect what we can through the litigation process. We have, there's been an established definition for 2 years that has been in practice. And, Cigar Rights of America, PCA, we are defending that definition. We believe that that is the best way to protect the vast majority of the industry from future regulation, so that we don't have to spend $10 million 2 years from now. I know others want to expand that definition. And look, it would be great to have the ability to protect what is on all of our member store shelves. But the reality that we face is that, it's, the lifeboat. You can only get so much into the lifeboat. If you have too many people in the lifeboat, the whole thing's going to sink. I think that's an appropriate analogy. So there's differences there. There's filings that will really reflect that. But for the categories that don't meet the definition of premium cigar, we are going to fight those regulations and legislation, at other levels of government. If Congress or the FDA tries to restrict, I'll use the example of flavored cigars. We were one of the most adamant groups fighting the prohibition on flavored cigars.
You
Now,
have to. You
our
have to.
association doesn't consider a flavored cigar premium cigar, but we understand the importance it has in the marketplace and the retail impact. So that it's a nuance, it's a change. I think 6, 7 years ago, the association was throwing flavored cigars under the bus. That's not the case, at present. We are defending that in a very different way. The strategies and tactics are different, but in principle, there's a common understanding.
So what is it? I mean, like that's really not including not including long filler flavored cigars as premium is really like hurting the number one sold made cigar in the world, the Cuba Cuba. That is responsible for so many people discovering cigars and enjoying cigars. Like I kind of feel that not including that when we know that that is the most bought cigar in the world, that is the most oftentimes the first cigar that people smoke that brings people into the non-flavored to have that definition. It's kind of like you're discounting the pioneer that's holding up the industry for once that cigar smoker turns non-flavored. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we obviously understand the importance that Drew Estate, a lot of their portfolio has infused or flavored cigars, and they certainly have an important role in the cigar industry. And that goes to the point of any regulations that would be put on those products. For instance, the tobacco manufacturing practices standards. We're fighting against that. There's a lot of things that are not in the definition of a premium cigar that I think that most of the manufacturers would want to include if we didn't face the realities of what the FDA regulation would be. I'll use a perfect example. Rocky Patel is one of the folks that is working with us from
Very
the CR
closely.
side with PCA. He and I were in the courtroom with the judge in the oral or in the brief about the most recent status update before the court. He's willing to give up Java as considered a premium cigar, long filler infused cigar, because he understands the gravity of the situation. And, this could, if done incorrectly or done in the wrong way, where it would include all of these products, it would sink the ship. It could sink the ship. So, I think unfortunately, look, the JC Newman company with a lot of the historic machines, we would love to have them included, but that manual, the application of the wrapper there based off of the machinery would be excluded. Toscano is another company, very important. They have cigars that wouldn't meet the definition of a premium cigar. These are members that, we're committed to fighting for, keeping them on the market, fighting any future regulations, and looking at, what are the existing regulations that are pain points that we can go after. But in crafting the federal definition of a premium cigar, it's gonna be it's been the most difficult discussion going 20 years now, or even more so for.
It's a stupid discussion to even have to have. I mean, let's just be honest. It's a sin tax. It's a sin regulation. It does nothing for nobody. It doesn't stop anything. They know that nobody's going into shops that's under 21 and buying a premium cigar. No, they're going to buy Swisher Sweets. They're emptying out the tobacco and they're filling it with other things. Like there's a 16-year-old's not asking for somebody to buy them a flavored Cuba Cuba, So like, but at a certain point in time, you remember the old adage? They came for my what is it? They came for my neighbor down the street. We said nothing. They came for my neighbor. I said nothing. They came for me, and there was nobody to say anything. It sounds like you guys aren't leaving them defenseless, but you're not I kind of feel like PCA is being forced to give up more than the federal government when it really should be the other way around.
Well, I mean, I think we definitely spoke out when the characterizing flavor prohibition. That was a regulation that was withdrawn earlier this year, and all throughout the way we were speaking out for that category in particular. So, I think there's different ways of approaching it. As I mentioned, strategies and tactics are critical at this stage. We're 10 years down the run with this litigation. So to all of a sudden include things in this definition that weren't, this definition has been in active use, as I mentioned, for 2 years in practice as it relates to user fee collection. So there's a lot of things that the court, the judge, recently said in that hearing that has influenced our position on this. And we want to, again, protect as much as we can possible. We're not going to leave those categories defenseless. And it's not like if this goes through and we have the 8-part definition that exists right now, these products are not going to have to come off the market. There will be additional regulations that they have to deal with. And I think that's where the conversation will lead of like, how can we attack those regulations?
So, what's your take then on packaging? I was actually just having a discussion today with somebody. I think whatever somebody wants to call something, Munchies, Skittles, Cookie Monster, to me, it means no difference because I understand. Like, come on, no manufacturers going after a 6-year old that watches Bugs Bunny and happens to like Cookie Monster. Like, so what is your approach? Because is it, could I at least rightfully say that your personal opinion is, from a personal standpoint, you consider them premium cigars, but from a legalized definitional standpoint, it's just too hard to encompass them right now?
So in talking about the packaging, I'll take that one first. The packaging side, we actually released guidance and standards and said, hey, you want to avoid this. A lot of the underpinnings of regulation and legislation that hurts this industry comes from the Tobacco Control Act. And the primary purpose of the Tobacco Control Act is youth access to tobacco. So anything that may even be perceived as such, that is what the anti-tobacco groups glom onto. That's what the FDA gloms onto. So we actually set out guidance that said, hey, some of these things you don't want to include those. And we've actually had things at our trade show that we've said, hey, you cannot display this at the trade show. We don't want to play Big Brother, but we don't want the FDA coming in and putting further restrictions on the industry at large. So we've taken proactive action on that to kind of self-police and self-regulate so that Big Brother doesn't come in and do it for us in a more draconian way or in a draconian way. So some of those things of the cartoon stuff, the things that would violate trademark or trade dress. Other industries have cleaned up this many years ago. The liquor industry, they have released a lot of that stuff.
The
I know
marijuana industry sure as shit hasn't.
they have not. Some of the liquor industry with the
They
ready
literally come out
stuff,
with gummy bears that
yeah,
look
I
like
mean,
gummy bears.
it's kind of crazy. But that was one of the things that we had to address again because the youth access issue, and that's as you widen the category of what could be considered a premium cigar, you have the questions of does that increase youth access? And like for the data that we have on the existing definition, that's what we put forth. And that becomes concerning because if there's an uptick in youth access, then you're going to have the legislators and the regulators coming down pretty hard on the industry. So we're trying to prevent that. I think PCA, we really have pushed forth making sure our stores are age verified. We have the new tobacco 21. You have to be 21 years old to buy tobacco, ID'd at 30. That's the first layer. I think if the government wants to enforce that and focus on that, then they should leave the rest of the industry alone. When it comes to further regulations, because if they're following that law, if they're following and enforcing that, then we don't have any issues.
So I just want to touch on the youth access. This is the biggest bullshit malarkey point that I've ever heard the government use. There's no shortage of youth access in alcohol. None. Like, there's literally none. I can't tell you a single freaking party I've ever been to in my entire high school career where I ever saw somebody smoking a cigar, drinking a beer that was under 18. Like, so, like, to me, are you guys allowed to be like, do you understand what you're saying? Like, do you understand the reality of youth access around cigars versus you get youth access in THC, youth access in beer, wine, and liquor? I just feel like, and maybe it's because I'm closely involved in the cigar world, and maybe that's why it feels like the thumb of the government is pressed stronger on cigars than it is cigarettes. It's pressed stronger than alcohol. It's pressed stronger than I can't say pipe tobacco because those guys have been screwed for years. And it's pressed stronger than alcohol for sure. Like, I don't know. Does that make sense? Am I correct in that thought process?
I think looking at alcohol, the challenge with the differences there of the constitutional amendments overturning prohibition, they have, the ability to push back utilizing that. Their regulator is not the Food and Drug Administration. The cannabis industry, those regulations are coming. They're dealing with a lot of stuff that we were dealing with, 10 years ago, and even CBD and some of the other tobacco products. Right now, with the youth access point, the vapor products and oral nicotine, that's where I think they're receiving the most regulations or concern from lawmakers. So, as it relates to premium cigars, because of the court victories that we discussed previously, we are in a pretty good position as it relates to federal legislation and federal regulation. But things change very quickly, so we have to make sure that we continue to fortify that position. The cigarettes and the challenge there is, I think a lot of it is a game of who's going to be the last company. There's a lot of jockeying for market share over there, and some of those big tobacco, we fight against them in the cigarettes just as much as we do the anti-tobacco groups. The anti-smoking or smoke-free future, a lot of the cigarette companies are the ones pushing for that. So you have,
Of course they
the
are.
challenge of, like, you and I both love going to cigar bars, going to cigar lounges, having a meal where you can enjoy a cigar at the same time. Well, a lot of the big tobacco would like that to go away. So, that is a challenge that we face. So, but all in all, the position we're in right now is a lot better than we were in, even within my time in the industry, which is 6 years.
Now you mentioned that just now your time's been in for 6 years, but PCA has talked about rolling out a 5-year strategic plan. Can you reveal one of the big goals that might either surprise the industry, and then what would be some of the risks that you perceive in pursuing it?
Yeah, so we are working on a strategic plan. It's going to be a 3-year plan. That's one of the other changes that I have made. Likely we'll be rolling that out next year.
So
Now,
it's gone from a 3-year to a 5-year to a 3-year.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's correct. I think in that there's going to be a heavy emphasis on international recruitment. There's going to be a heavy emphasis on um, member retention. So, what are the programs and benefits that retailers in the United States need to better their businesses? So, like, we're working, a lot of the challenge outside of the government sphere come from terms of services of communications companies, of social media companies, of
Correct.
financial services. So we're setting up, we're like, all right, how can we build this technology? How can we partner and ensure that this company won't shut down a tobacco business that will allow them to continue to use those services and products? So, like, we're working and vetting right now a bank that would provide preferred financial services to our members, guarding against what we see as potential risks for the future. So I think that there could be a little bit of aversion of like, well, what's PCA doing partnering with a bank? What's PCA doing, creating or buying part of a texting platform? Things like that, where there's going to be investment, there's going to be research, and we have to prioritize. So it's not going to be done overnight. That's why there's a little bit of a delay there in what we're doing, because it's holistically looking at what are the technology is going to be a big piece of this. We recently kind of took stock of what we have available and said, this is where we need, this subcommittee is going to find and identify where we need to make significant improvements and recommendations for the board for funding different projects. So that's where it's nice having this war chest where we can look and say, all right, the industry is deficient here. We need to make an investment right now, or we're going to have problems in 5 or 6 years because, our members aren't going to be able to create customer loyalty programs because they can't text people that sign up to receive, notices.
Now that would be regulatory. That wouldn't necessarily be the policy of the company that they're working with. That
No
would be a
policy of the company.
see that to just money is money. Who the hell cares?
They don't see it that way. You have a lot of, so we ran into this issue.
Yeah,
Many of
because
our members,
Colin just says here, Ronnie from Secreto, or Secreto had his credit card shut down because of a moral clause. How does
yep.
the PCA fight a fucking moral clause? That's the biggest bullshit
So
ever.
we have to push back. A lot of times we'll call one of the things with texting, which was the example I was using, it's called SHAFT, sex, hate, alcohol, firearms, and tobacco. And they were restricting codes. You could be 21, sign up at the register. A lot of times
Jesus.
people will wish you a happy birthday or say, hey, there's this cigar event. But if you use terms like smoke, cigar, tobacco, the texts were being prevented from being sent. So an association, similar to how I mentioned, we issued guidance for our membership on certain things related to the trade show. Another trade group issued guidance, and the companies, the carriers, and I'm not saying it's this company, but an example,
Yeah,
like a Verizon or a
sure.
T-Mobile or one of those, they came in and started shutting down the messages from being sent. Terms of services of use, nothing to do, and it was being done through a third party. So, like, you might purchase as a retailer Square, a system for payment processing, and have that text feature that is then run through the carrier. Your messages are being prevented from being sent through that terminal. Through that. So I'm not saying that those specific companies are doing it, but that's just kind of a real world example to give people a flavor.
So how are you guys like attacking a because I as a solid libertarian, okay, I don't trust government ever from either side. Okay, they literally will lie to face with their fingers crossed behind their back and shake your hand with the other hand. So you might not say it, but I certainly will. How do you know that's not federal regulators putting power or putting the thumb on those companies to stop this shit? So it's not their policy, but it's kind of if you do X, we might regulate you a little bit more, that type thing.
I mean, we asked them, what's the regulation? What's the legislation? There is none. We researched it on our end. It doesn't exist. And they were threatened $10,000 fines. And they would cite a regulation. So then we would say, what is this regulation? And then they would cite this policy. And then we went to Congress, several members of Congress, and they actually brought companies in and said, what the hell are you doing here? There is no regulation. Who gets that $10,000 fine if you issue it? So, like, we kind of did an investigation of sorts of our own. And at this present stage, the foot is off the gas on sending those communications. They've created a lot of channels where if you're age gating and you can verify that it's going to persons that are 21 and over, you're able to send those messages. So, the credit card things, anybody watching, members of ours or folks in the industry, feel free to shoot them our way. Because that is, to me, the scariest thing. I get asked the question, what keeps you up at night? Private sector issues, because a lot of times you have to push back and you don't have the ballot box. You have to file a lawsuit, or you don't get the services you sign in that fine print. Oh, you're a tobacco company, you don't get that. So it's much more challenging than it is dealing with the FDA or Congress or a state legislature when it's a private company.
Do you think those policies were put in place by private companies, maybe in the beginning, over kind of like what was it? The whole thing with, again, not getting political, it's just an example, okay? The whole thing with the Biden administration saying, oh, we don't like to see this type of stuff, and Facebook going, they don't like to see it. Maybe we should just not show it. And kind of like a tongue-in-cheek regulation built into. Do you think there was any of that where these companies were like, well, they just don't like to see tobacco, so we're gonna stop the door before it opens?
A lot of it has to deal with
Does
the
that make sense?
ESG. That's where it kind of
Yeah, well,
started.
yeah.
The ESG movement. Certainly, I think that some of
That's
these
all
things
backdoor
were,
regulation.
were well intentioned, but like alcohol, firearms, and tobacco, these are legal products. The other categories, that's not for us
No,
to
no,
fight.
not at
But
all.
like, when it comes to that, we've actually talked to some of the firearms group. We've talked to some of the liquor groups and said, hey, we have to be able to communicate with our customers that are adults. And, so there's been a lot of pushback on that. And I think that you saw, the members of Congress that took this issue up, you were threatening hearings and things like that. They were thinking, all right, this is attacking conservative businesses. So there was a little bit of that political angle that actually came from this, more from their side identifying it.
And yeah, so I just can't help but think in some way that was kind of an ode to these companies to self-regulate themselves. And oftentimes, it's somebody, come on, you've been in this for a long time. A lot of times, these companies will regulate themselves when they see that coming down the horizon, so they don't get dinged. And that's I think that shows inside the tobacco world, in the cigar world, especially with the text messaging thing, or even the PayPal issue around tobacco. I'm sure you're very familiar with that. That was a big deal.
Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with the banks, and then like the, service providers. For the longest time with that Shaft example, and in the financial services, everyone blames the other. There's like 3 or 4 different companies, and they're all very large companies, and they all blame each other. So you have to make 4 or 5 calls just to identify who's actually setting up the policy.
Yeah, of
Once you do that, then they still blame the others.
course.
So it's just a web, and it becomes a time suck. That's why I say it is the most challenging issue that we face in the industry, is these private sector quasi regulations, and it's almost these
Mhm.
companies masquerading as government.
Correct. It's an end run around constitutional rights, to an extent, and that's where I take huge issue to it. Now, for everybody, I'm just going to translate. When Josh uses the word time tonight, that coincides with money. There's nothing Josh does or PCA does where time is involved that money is not a part of that time factor. Am I correct in that state? When you say time to unwind, to delve in, the back end of that is also money.
So in some instances, yes, but in some, like in that example, it really is the physical amount of time that it takes to figure out who's responsible.
Yeah,
And
but
like I
that's your
mentioned,
time.
we
You're
have
paid.
yeah, we have three people. So then I have to, tell if it's me or one of our team members, they're devoting a lot of time to it. When I refer to time in the legal sense, that's where outside lawyers, our association, along with Cigar Rights of America and CAA, I mean, this is going to be, I think we'll cross the $12 million mark on just federal litigation. So, like, it's very expensive. Every year, hundreds of thousands of dollars each, if not millions, each association is putting towards defending the industry. So, yes, you're right. When I do say time, a lot of it is also time and money.
To me, that is just asinine that we put 12, that we're going to be putting 12 million. It's asinine to me that we need to have these legal fights. So the government just needs to leave everybody the hell alone and just let them take their own way in life and keep the kids out of it, like you said. The
Mhm.
30 age limit, that is the regulation. That's it. Anything above that, everything else should be left up to the states. And I think you would agree with me, if states want to do certain things, that's much more at a constitutional level, in my opinion, than the federal government.
Yeah, and if the state's getting too out of whack, then we'll fight that. I mean, look for
I'd
example,
rather have you guys fighting the states than the federal
it's
government.
yeah, it's a little bit easier state versus local. We're having and I there's a lot good going on in the industry. I want to make that point, but
Totally.
another kind of haunting thing that's going on right now are towns in Massachusetts at the local level banning generational smoking. So if
That's my
you're
next category.
born after a certain date, you'll never be able to buy a tobacco product. And this has built kind of a big coalition because people are saying, all right, you're unelected. These are unelected public health boards. So they are coming in and saying, yeah, you can't do this. And, what age discrimination, definitely. It's been validated by the Massachusetts Supreme Court based off of their constitution. So there has been legal challenges already to this. But it's developed that we're part of a coalition fighting this, and it has everybody from the gaming side to the alcohol side. I mean, people that even folks in caffeine are worried that they're going to ban like energy drinks and things like that. And it's very arbitrary. You can't vote these people out in many instances. So that's another really big headache for our industry.
Now there was a rule that was passed. We're going to get into generational bans too. That's on the docket for sure, because I'm very concerned about that. But there was a rule passed. There was a court challenge in the gun industry that effectively stopped. What's the um, you would know, it's the rule that allowed lawmakers to pass a law, and then whatever agency could interpret that law. What am I thinking of?
Chevron
Chevron
deference.
deference, that threw Chevron deference essentially out. That helps the cigar industry, because doesn't that force now these regulators to actually abide definitionally to the period of the law versus these wide swath interpretations of the law?
For future federal regulations, So that will be definitely something that we will utilize, and that was a big win with
So
the Supreme Court
we can't go back in time on those,
on a lot of those things. No,
but the court allowed the guns to go back in time.
I mean, if the statute of limitations exists still for it, it's possible for some things, but it's mainly for future, uh, regulations. And I want to preface: I'm not a lawyer, but I've asked questions like this from our lawyers and have been told, like, because I was like, how the hell do we not sue on the generation
Correct.
smoking bans? Like, that's I wanted to. And I was told in Massachusetts, based off of their constitution, that there would be their state constitution, that it would likely result into a loss, and that it's been tried and they already have been validated. So that's kind of the present situation in Massachusetts. But I have also been told in other states, if they were to try this, it would be ripe for a lawsuit. So there's no federal generational smoking ban that has been introduced at present, but that's one that it's very easy to fight back on there.
So how do you guys even start? Isn't Massachusetts the live free or die state, or is that New Hampshire?
I think that's New
Is
Hampshire.
that New Hampshire? Okay, that's the
Well,
one with the snake on it. Like, but like most of the New England states are like known for telling people to go fuck themselves for trying to control their life. So it's how is PCA? First off, explain to us where you were when you originally heard of the generational ban, what your steps were you took the generational ban idea, what some of the steps where you took after hearing that, and what are the steps you're going to take moving forward.
So it first started, to my knowledge, in my experience with it, actually testified. My colleague, who's now our outside contractor, Ryan Parada, testified remotely in New Zealand when they were considering this. New Zealand
Australia is doing it
and
too.
Australia, they both were, and I mean the UK is considering it now as well. So we first identified it outside of the United States. We started pushing back, saying that this is a problem. It's only a matter of time. In the United States, California, Hawaii, believe it or not, Tennessee has introduced it at a period of time. Obviously, not going anywhere in that
Well, I
state,
believe it. Tennessee still has dry counties, so I believe
but like
that.
certainly goofy ideas pop up all over. But we're in Massachusetts, where it's popping up in towns. We're part of this coalition. We're fighting against it. We're hosting an event in Boston for state legislators and some of the local folks in August, a cigar event. And then we have our grassroots campaigns hitting the public health boards with reasons why these shouldn't go into effect and why they're problematic.
And
The only
what would some of those reasons be to the public health boards that you guys would show?
I think it is the dumbest policy that exists, because you ban it in a municipality. What do people do? Like, the only people that benefit from this is the state of New Hampshire, because they have a great, no OTP tax, and you go on the border and you have alcohol, tobacco, and people are buying it by the truckloads. It's not decreasing consumption. It's not having any intended positive public health outcomes. It is just shifting buying patterns, and the localities in the state of Massachusetts is losing out on sales tax revenue.
Somebody's getting paid to make that law pass. It's just like dry counties. The only reason why dry counties ever existed is because somebody got paid. They're due for every drink coming through. Somebody's getting paid to make that happen. And how can a tobacco company not have standing to sue within that state? Because that's the state effectively shutting a company down. Like if enough do that, it does shut a company down.
So
That's
the
picking winners and losers.
Massachusetts at the state level has introduced it, but it has not passed. the where it has passed has been like by local public health boards. So there's a few towns, populations ranging from 10 to 15,000 all the way up to 50,000 in the outer Boston area that have, actually put these forth.
That's scary to me because that literally is a complete governmental takeover of a determination of an industry. If enough states do that, tobacco's gone in 50 years,
Yeah.
and it hurts the industry. It stops sales, it stops growth, it encourages price raises because less people are buying cigars. But the biggest thing that this country has not learned a damn thing from is the drug war. Outlawing anything does nothing. Marijuana was illegal my whole life in Illinois until recently. However, there was never a shortage of finding it. So like it encourages people to do the corner cigar sale, you
Well, and I
know.
think, in the case of New Zealand, the political party shifted and they actually withdrew their generational smoking ban. So they had it in effect for a while and then ultimately withdrew it. So as I mentioned, the political trade winds change. Like it's one of those things where as and again, we're going to fight for the ability. That's why one of the reasons why we launched an alliance membership, because you have distilleries, breweries, wineries, restaurants, golf courses, gun clubs selling cigars. Like we want to have several different channels for adults to be able to purchase premium cigars. But I could see it going to exemptions for authorized retailers with a tobacco license. So for instance, you wouldn't be able to buy tobacco products at 7-Eleven or a grocery store. That's not ideal. I think it's crap, and we're against those things. But Massachusetts is going to have to realize how dumb the policy is and dial it back a little bit. And I could see that being one of the ways where they dial it back. Of like, the mom and pop corner store that is a tobacconist that's been there for 80 years, they're not going to be subject to the generational smoking ban.
See, and that's picking winners and losers. And
It,
that's why this is why government does nothing but just wrench everything up. And when it gets out of the way, I'm a firm believer that the only reason why we need lobbyists is because of government interference. If government just if All right, I'm gonna get geeky here, but Josh will know where I'm going. Hopefully, some of you. Article 1, Section 8 lists out 17 enumerated powers. If it's not listed in there, the federal government has no authority and it should be allowed to the states. That's what the 10th Amendment is for. I'd rather see you guys fight state legislation than federal legislation.
yeah.
Um,
So I
it's
mean,
easier to fight state legislation too, probably.
we do both. I mean, like I said, we've gotten some wins this year at the states. I mean, tax caps. I think we're up to, with Louisiana, I want to say 17 tax caps, which is great policy for us. I want to get to 30 or 40 if we can, to make it easier. I mean, it's good. We've protected the ability and gotten some unique carve outs. For instance, in the state of Florida, you go to a beach or a public park, you're not allowed to smoke cigarettes. You're not allowed to vape, but there is an exemption for premium cigars. You're able to light up a premium cigar, uh, because we got that carve out. And, obviously Florida is a key state for us where the industry is based. So, we have gotten some wins. We've been able to defend and advance on a variety of different levels. But yeah, you're right. There's no shortage of challenges. And at the state level, we instituted, and this is something that I created even before I was executive director, was a block grant program for state retail associations to hire their own lobbyists to become more active, start recruiting. And we've already this year dispersed $40,000 from that grant program. I think that last year we did 50. So, nearly $100,000 over 2 years. Seed money. We started a new California association, got the lawyers to draft the bylaws and put all those pieces together. So we're making an investment into the state infrastructure. And a lot of those state associations, we handle their dues collection. So like, Virginia, for example, was part of a pilot we did where a PCA member can pay their Virginia dues and they can pay their PCA dues right at the same time. And then we cut a check to Virginia. And we've also provided Virginia with a grant. So some good things at the state level in advocacy going on.
So we have a congressperson here, a state rep, that's pushing in Colorado for, I think, a 20% cap on tax. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yep. Yep.
Are you guys working with that? Are you sponsoring that in any way? Working with him?
So that's Glenn Loop, who is our director of state advocacy. I know he's been working with that office in Colorado. Also, Mary Zarmak from Smoker Friendly is on our executive committee and board of directors. So that's their area of expertise, but they have been in contact working that bill.
Now, why do you think like states like New York, Colorado, California, like what is the rationale behind the exuberant sales tax? California is a huge cigar state for the amount of tax that they apply to that. So why do you think those three states, and I know there's more, but those are the three big tax ones that I know of off the top of my head. Why are they going after? They're not doing that for all tobacco. I feel they're really hitting cigars.
It's all tobacco. OTP. That those rates are exorbitant across the board, and like the tax increases that they're looking at would affect all of those categories.
What's the rationale behind the tax increase?
I mean, they're cash strapped. A
Okay,
lot of
so
states
that's
are
it.
broke, and it's a money grab,
Yeah.
and their math and their economics are off, and they're listening to these public health groups saying that, look, you can save money in healthcare costs, raise revenue. This is good policy, and it's like, well, no, like all that does, people in Nevada where there's a tax cap or online, are shipping into a lot of these tax states. So, I think that's the challenge that it presents. The tax dollars you would think want to stay local, but those legislators unfortunately don't think that way. Utah is actually has the highest tax in the nation for OTP.
Now you brought up Utah, and Richard Beard here asked a question. And since you brought up Utah, they're a state that has state-owned liquor stores. Are some of these states fighting for state-owned tobacco shops? Like, is
No,
that a play in their mind? Like, so again, it doesn't make sense to me. So then, if you're going to have one state-owned, just as bad, and some would say alcohol's destroyed more families, killed more people, far than I don't know people that get a DUI for smoking a cigar, but so like, what's the rationale for their opinion on not pushing for something like? Would the PCA support something like that if a state came in and said zero tax, but we own the shops?
no, we wouldn't, because our core membership, it's free enterprise, it's small business members. I think a lot of our growth, we've seen a couple, 4 or 5 friends, they've been successful in other businesses, and they decided to create an environment where people can come as a community and enjoy a cigar. You go to these kind of sterile stock liquor stores that are, state owned. They're not the same as, your corner store that
No,
is owned by a small business
no,
owner.
they're not.
So, the government doesn't do anything like that best. It's free enterprise and private citizens that create these small businesses. So we want to make sure that there are as least restrictions on small businesses, retail tobacconists, wherever it may be in any state, and we'll continue to fight for that.
Now, Colin asks, do you know anything about the Wisconsin allowing new lounges?
Yep, that's another area where Glenn is working with one of our another executive committee member, Paul Grow, who's also in Wisconsin. So a lot of times we work with one or two, sometimes maybe three or four key retailers in any given state, because they understand their environment better than we do.
Sure,
We
for
can't
sure, yeah.
understand all 50 states, but Glenn Loop, who used to be the executive director of Cigar Rights of America, he is now our director of state affairs, and he handles kind of triaging, working with the state associations, working with key retailers in each state. And Colorado, Wisconsin, those are examples. I use the example of Louisiana. That's where he's involved. Because of proximity to Dover, Delaware, it will likely be me going up and testifying when that bill gets a hearing. So, sometimes we just pitch in because we are a small staff. One of the things transitioning to executive director that has been partially taken off my plate has been a lot of the state, going and testifying and
Which
doing
makes total sense.
all of that because it is such a time suck.
Yeah, it makes total sense, and it's a cost. You got to fly there. You got to stay overnight. We do have a viewer of the show here that says, "Hey, he's near DC and he'd love to meet up with you and have a cigar."
Yeah, our we have our townhouse is right near Union Station. We have people come in and out all the time. My email address is joshua@premiumcigars.org. I do travel quite a bit, but chances are one of our team members will be in the office. We have as crazy and as much as the PCA does, we only have 7 full-time staff members.
But
So
you guys have
that's
done a lot with 7.
putting on the trade show, all the events, all the advocacy. We have some great contractors, but we are a bootstrapped, lean organization, and that's why I feel comfortable, you know, selling membership, going to retailers and saying, "Hey, it's $600. This is what you're getting for it." And we want to build more value to it, and that's why we're doing that through some of our programs. But we do want to make sure that we're getting people involved with the organization to the full extent possible.
Now, Colin's out there in Wisconsin. What would you tell to people in states that are draconian around this? How can they help? How can they help get a bill passed outside of supporting financially the PCA and CRA?
Yeah, so we have a consumer and retailer site for advocacy called cigaraction.org. So you can go there, and I believe the different alerts are on there. So you can go and fight against the taxes, support the different things. There's a list of alerts on cigaraction.org in the state tab. So you can write to your legislators and see all that's going on at the state level there. Federally, we get a couple of those as well. But I think in addition to financial contributions, that's a good place to start. And then I mentioned our alliance membership, which there's more information on that. Premiumcigars.org, our core website, and that is our kind of membership category for consumers or really businesses or people with a financial stake in the cigar industry that aren't brick and mortar retail or manufacturers.
Now, you had mentioned that it's $600 for a shop retailer to be a member, but one of the things that I have heard complaint around PCA is just the over exuberance of cost, whether it's for the trade show, whether it's for travel. I don't know what it is for a booth at PCA, but you figure probably add double it to include expenses of travel and hotel. How do you overcome these pushbacks when people are like, it's just so expensive, man? I can't show up to PCA.
Yeah, I mean, we have cut costs for folks, especially New Orleans is cheaper than Las Vegas. We're working to get as favorable contracts as possible. The cost of everything has gone up over the
Very
years.
much.
And we don't routinely raise dues or raise rates on the trade show. It's been done very infrequently. So our dues are a lot cheaper than they actually should be, looking at our industry peers in the other associations. So we keep those cost controls in place. If this is an investment in the business, and like the trade show is the Super Bowl, it's the pinnacle. If you want to get your brand on the market, making that investment for a 10 by 10 booth, you can go for $3,000. And I'm sure that, there are affordable travel options available, if you're coming to New Orleans or Las Vegas for that. But, if this is going to be a serious business, for a retailer or manufacturer, and you want to get the best practices, you want to be in the market, you want the best products, we're building that marketplace for folks, and they're going to have to make those business decisions whether they believe that they can get the value out of that. We've had a boutique pavilion in the past where I can tell you our revenue from that pavilion is $150 per company. So it's not like the PCA is jacking up prices and price gouging a lot of folks. A lot of it has to do with the construction of the booth, and the materials and the convention center, and a lot of those components to it. So we're very cognizant of making it as affordable as possible and coming up with options for every size business, whether you're getting your first start in the industry as a new brand owner, or if you've been there in exhibiting at the PCA for 50 years.
Now, this next question's I think your answer is going to float into the can't please everybody panel, but I'm still going to ask you.
Sure.
Some of the tensions between the PCA and retailers sometimes focus on the views of the PCA on either going towards advocacy or putting money towards an event, a trade show. And so, how are you justified splitting the resources across these priorities? Because I know you've heard from retailers, the PCA needs to be bigger, better. We need to have, Michael Bublé speak next year, or whoever. And then people are like, well, wait a second, let's have a smaller show. Let's focus more on ad. So, how do you split the baby on that? And where do you look when costs need to be cut?
Yeah.
Does that
So,
make sense?
we're in growth mode, and I think that you can't be this. What I don't forget the saying: you can't be a penny foolish, to sacrifice. However that saying goes, but we're making strategic investments in the association, in the trade show, and it's paying dividends. And we're getting more people involved. We're getting membership. For the first time in at least my tenure with the association, we crossed $1 million in dues revenue. That's an important feat. So,
Big
the
time.
trade show and membership is really the core that funds the advocacy portion. So you have to have a good quality trade show and a membership, in order to have that advocacy component. So one of the other things that I've been doing is diversifying our revenue, making sure that we're not solely dependent on a trade show. So, there's some folks that are like, what is PCA doing with this Dubai thing? This is a crazy idea. We don't own the trade show in Dubai. We are a marketing partner of the trade show. We're involved in setting up the conference and sending it out to our manufacturer audience and encouraging them to participate. But we receive a financial contribution from that show. So, it's licensing the PCA trademark or logo, much like we're doing with certain products. The cigar that I'm about to smoke when we wrap up is the Kristoff with the PCA logo, Kristoff made a $5,000 contribution in order to have that logo on the band and launch that.
Jared's a board member too.
Yeah, Jared actually just rolled off the board.
Oh,
But
yes, that's right. His came to a 10-year.
he was wonderful in doing this, and that's, look, this is a win-win. Kristoff made a great cigar. The packaging is great. It has the PCA logo. Customers will see, oh, Premium Cigar Association, PCA. We did one with Toscano, and I believe it's their number one or number two seller in the United States, the PCA Brenta that they did, that they launched last year with us. So we're doing a couple of these really cool projects, launch events, and that will help diversify and make us less dependent on just the trade show or just membership. So as I mentioned, we're working on kind of the strategic plan, or insulating the association and preparing it for this next set of challenges. I want to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars through programs like this, through licensing, where I don't want to be coming to folks saying with my hand out, hey, donate to the association. Let's come up with win-wins where you can benefit, where we can benefit. Our circulation of the magazine has increased with the development of our Alliance membership and the increase in our membership. That's led to more advertising revenue. So we have a quarterly magazine that's bringing in more.
Do you have Shankin working with you on that?
No. We partner with Cigar Aficionado on other things, but our magazine is more of a trade publication.
I just didn't know if he would, because he's kind of the king of the magazine world with Wine Aficionado, or with wine, and so I just wasn't sure if he was a consultant on the whole
No,
magazine side.
they're wonderful at Cigar Aficionado. They actually do our keynote panel we had with Guy Fieri and Dave Savona. Glenn Loop and I actually went up to New York, and I had met Marvin for the first time, and they do a lot of good stuff with their Big Smoke events, as well as the magazine. But our magazine's more geared towards retailers than it is consumers.
Now, I know in the past there's been some, internal industry politics, right, that also hinder progress. And this will be kind of the last industries driven question. Then we're going to spend the rest of the time kind of focusing on you, and what makes you tick. But can you kind of share an example of a compromise the PCA had to make, either between membership, conflicting members' interests, or any way, and kind of how you navigate conflicting member interests without alienating other members or stakeholders? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think the elephant in the room for PCA, going back 4 or 5 years, was Consumer Day. There's a lot of people that want to have consumers at the trade show. There's also a lot of people that are vehemently opposed to it. And I think, when we announced our Alliance membership, people were worried, are they going back to this? Are they, bringing back this Consumer Day thing? And I have been unequivocally clear, as long as I'm leading the association, we are not having a Consumer Day tied to the trade show. But as a compromise to that, we are actively looking for partnership opportunities with our retailers or with cigar media. Somebody like a Cigar Aficionado, it would be great where we could do a new event where our Alliance members could attend. Or, we have great board members that have large scale festivals like the Coastal Virginia Cigar Festival. Scott Regina runs there. Is there a way that PCA can develop an activation at one of those? I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Consumers need to get involved, and they need to support the industry if this is going to be something that's going to be successful long term. They need to pony up a little bit. And, I encourage them to join Cigar Rights of America, which is a great partner of ours. I encourage them to, join our Alliance membership. But I think that's where it was a highly contested issue. I have a very clear stance on this. And I believe it is a compromise where we're working with our industry strengths. We are not transferring and changing the core of our marquee event. The Super Bowl of the cigar industry being the operative word, is the PCA trade show. And, we're policing that. We're set guidelines. We don't want consumers coming to this. This really is the opportunity for retailers and manufacturers and distributors and media to come together.
And
All the other,
that's super common, right? There's so many industry events that are industry only.
yep,
CES, the largest consumer electronics show in the world, literally industry only. You can't get in there as just a consumer, even though it's called Consumer Electronics Show. So to me, I don't have a problem with that. That makes sense because you don't want the riffraff. You don't want you want serious people there making serious orders, not people there, consumers going, "Hey, can I try your latest cigar?" Right? Because now you're dealing with an irritation, right?
yep.
Or a potential irritation. I'll say it, even though you probably won't. I'll say it. Um,
We
so
don't
I
want, people, and that goes to your other point. And sorry to cut you
no,
off.
no, no, you're fine.
One point there is like talking about the value of the trade show. If retailers and manufacturers that are willing to make that investment are going there, the last thing that we want is them to lose business because you have somebody going around trying to trick or treat for cigars. So
Trick or treat for cigars. That is awesome.
that's where we want to provide that value. I want to get those small companies to give them a shot. And like this year was great. 70 first time exhibitors. I think, obviously the membership growth, I'm proud of three things having four things. I'll list them for them. But if I keep thinking, I'll think of more of them. And I don't want to miss out. But statistically, the membership growth, very proud of what we accomplished. Lisa Sigler does an incredible job. Maria Cervantes does an incredible job. They deserve that credit. 70 new exhibitors. Our trade show team, Lisa Cox, Shannon, incredible job, as well as Lisa Sigler booking those booths. Lisa Sigler does the job of about 5 or 6 people. So, those are the two statistics that I'm most proud of. I think the other thing is that I got the opportunity to go to Nicaragua, the Dominican Republic, and Honduras, seeing the side of the industry where the product is made and seeing the individuals and families that depend on the consumption and the purchasing of consumers in the United States at our retail stores, and how they depend on that in Esteli and Donley and Santiago. I'm very proud. I think I was the first executive director to do all three in 1 year, and it's June and I've done all three. And I'm proud of that, because I think far too often we think in this very centric, what's in front of us, what's here in DC. And I'm not an empty suit in DC. I want to know the process. I want to know why it all clicks together and the importance of how retail connects with manufacturing. And I think I have a firm grasp on it. And the last one, I have retained our entire staff for this year, and we grew. So, I think a lot of the board now recognizes this was the smoothest transition between executive directors, because we didn't lose a step and we were prepared really on day one of where we were headed.
Well, knowing your background, looking at you on LinkedIn, you also don't seem like a guy that's underprepared. From your background, 10 years of lobbying, you're not a lobbyist because you're not prepared. You're a lobbyist because you are prepared, because you might only get one shot. So I lied. This is my last question around the PCA industry wise, and we'll get to you. One of the things I started the show with was how I'm actually looking forward to you being the ED of executive director of PCAs, because you are young. You're like I said, you're the youngest by probably 20 years to ever run the PCA. I think that's probably a valid statement. Um, and a lot of us are looking at that going, oh, How are you going to be bringing in the younger, not youth, but the younger, the newer cigar consumers? Because I do feel the cigar industry is very much aging. So what are you doing to bring in new, younger, 30-year-old smokers?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we're really focusing on is the next generation of the industry. We did a next generation panel at the PCA trade show this year. You have third generation folks that are now getting involved, fourth generation in some sense, and they are, in their 30s. And they're now starting to take leadership roles or a larger role. We had Klaas Kellner on that panel, Raquel Casada. I mean, you could look. Carlito Fuente the third is getting involved more actively. You have, Drew Newman has been active
Very
with
much for
JC Newman
years.
Company for a number of years. So, like, there's a good depth chart, the future of the industry and the manufacturing, and then you also on the retail side, and this, people aren't writing about this in any of the cigar magazines, but you have, I'll use the Newman cigar in Illinois. Ken and Julie Newman, their son is getting in the business. So like that to me, the next generation is organically getting involved, and as that takes shape, you're going to see their friends. Hey, I work at a cigar lounge. I own a part of a cigar lounge, or I own part of a cigar business. And then, of course, the pairing side of things. So we're really with the Alliance membership. Our subcommittee is chaired by the cigar buyer at Binny's Beverage Depot. We're looking at the pairings, the folks that are over COVID,
Hmm.
and we were talking in the green room before the show. Kind of, there were a couple good things that have come from COVID. One of which is, this show and the ability to communicate virtually and have conversations like this, and the accessibility of guests. But I think another positive outcome post pandemic is you had a lot of people doing cigar and bourbon pairings and collecting cigars and collecting bourbon pairings.
That is
And
a younger approach.
that is, and people would buy, instead of one or two sticks, they would buy a box of cigars. And you
Hmm.
saw an uptick. We were in the mini boom of the cigar industry. And it really, I know there was a dip in imports this past quarter, but you've had sustained growth after the pandemic where, people continue to enjoy cigars infrequently. I think all of us and most of your viewers and listeners, we're probably outliers where we, it's not a big deal if we go back to back to back 3 cigars in a row.
Oh
But your
yeah,
average cigar consumer smokes less than 2 a month. So, I
yeah.
think that's an important thing to point out. Like, I share cigars. I go whenever I'm out. I want to be kind of known as the cigar guy in DC. And I was at a reception yesterday, and I had somebody come. Oh, you're the cigar guy. You're the cigar guy. I give out a ton of cigars. Like that, I can sit there and talk hours about the intricacies. A little bit about this blend, this wrapper. This size, this vitola. What are the tasting notes? And like I said, I'm a cigar nerd. I'm a consumer first that just happens to be in this job. So, I have kind of that infectious, and I'll get nerdy on it. But instead of me going down that rabbit hole and talking someone's ear off, I will give people a cigar. And I had a couple of them made that called El Politico, and it has my name on it. And it's my business card. Like,
Really? How do we
try
get those?
I'll send you one. You send me your address. I'll send there. Now there are very few left. This was done, I want to say 4 years
Are you
ago.
allowed to say who makes it?
So it was Pichardo and Luciano. It was a
Oh,
collaboration
heavy
over
hitters.
the pandemic. I went to Nicaragua and worked on that project with them, and I have very few left. So you'll be one of the lucky ones to get it.
See, I think we need to make you a pocket protector, but like a three-finger pocket protector for so you always have cigars in your suit pocket.
Sometimes it's comical. It looks like I have a bulletproof vest on because I have cigars just popping out everywhere.
That's what I mean. We need to get you need to work and get somebody to make you a custom 3-finger pocket cigar holder, and every time you show up, you just, instead of a handkerchief or anything else, you just kind of adjust your cigars. I think that'd be fun.
I did I did have someone make me a suit that has the lining of the suit is different cigar bands that I smoked over the course of a year. So it's
That's
super cool
cool.
suit.
That's cool. That's
And
really
I
cool.
wear it at a lot of industry events, and then I take my coat off, and I'm like, "Look, here's your company. Here's your company." Some people like it more than others. They're like, "Oh my gosh, this is neat. How do I get one?"
So one quick question that we're going to jump into you. Are you open to allowing mobile cigar lounges to attend PCA?
Yeah, there's a membership for that. Yes.
Perfect. Richard, check it
Yeah.
out. There's a
So as long
membership. You
as
can do
you
it.
you have the license, a tobacco license, that's the key. Submit that. But we've actually seen a jump in mobile cigar lounges participating in the organization. So Lisa Sigler is the person that will vet the membership on that. But yes, we are allowing mobile cigar lounges to be members and participate.
All right. Now I want to kind of dive into Josh non PCA.
Uh oh.
When Josh is not ED of PCA, what does Josh do?
So I like three sports: Formula One, UFC, and hockey. I'm a big Washington Capitals fan. I usually go to one UFC fight, and I've been going to the Miami Grand Prix every year since it started. But I mentioned a little bit of a hospitality background with being a previous owner of cigars before taking this role
Yep.
and selling them. I am a partner in a chain of 5 taco and tequila bars. I'm a part owner of an Italian restaurant and also a sports bar. So I kind of frequent those spots. And two of them, the Italian restaurant and the sports bar, have wonderful cigar patios. So, like, I just
Plug
kind of
them. Plug them. Tell everybody.
Hyde Social in Clarendon, Virginia, and Carbonara in Ballston, Virginia. So they're both less than Carbonara just turned a year old, and then Hyde is not even a year old, but Carbonara was number 22 on the entire country's best new restaurants of 2024. So it is amazing. We got Sinatra impersonators on Friday, Saturday. So big fan of going to those places.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. So that's kind of that's kind of a unique thing that you bring to this, right? Is you actually owned a couple of shops too. Churchill, what was the name of it?
We had the Brig Cigar Lounge
Yeah,
and then Embassy Cigar Lounge.
Embassy Cigar Lounge. That's what
Yeah.
it was. And so you bring that experience, but you've been a lobbyist for 10 years. What has been a kind of a difference in approach to, well, let me ask it this way. What has been the thing that's been the most frustrating that you've learned of being a lobbyist for 10 years in dealing with government?
Ooh. That's tough. I mean, I've been in very different issue areas. When I started, it was transportation, working for the Motorcyclists Association. I did a stint in public health, working for the Diabetes Association, and also financial services with community bankers before going to PCA. And I think each group had its own set of challenges. And I honestly believe that the PCA is the best organization of all four, the best industry. And, despite all of our challenges, it's the most rewarding career for me. And that's why, I want this to be a long-term career for me. I think the other side of public health, working with the American Diabetes Association, I was a little bit younger and idealistic, and I remember having doing our lobby day, and our lobby day was funded by a major pharmaceutical company. So it was kind of like you go into this thinking you're going to change the world. And I had a family member pass from diabetes, so for me it was kind of personal.
Sure.
That's why I'm going into this. And I think the organizations that go out there and tout that they're the most noble of causes, if you dig deeper, they actually have a lot of issues. Stability, a lot of those nonprofits in the health space, they hire a bunch of people and then they don't know how to manage their finances. And then come December, right before the holidays, they're getting rid of 200 people.
Mhm.
So, it's that. I will say with PCA and our organization, the way that we're growing in a responsible manner, and that's what I've told the board. Like, I am saying no, I don't want to spend money here. Like, we need to throttle this. Let's grow our revenues, and then we'll take that step. So, I have a staffing plan to increase our staff by 4, but it's over a 3-year period, and I've identified the roles where we're going to hire and things like that. Really, we could this year do that, but I want to make it so that it's the current staff are rewarded for their hard work, and that it's one where we don't have to lay off people, that it is a stable organization. I'm running the association like I would my businesses. And I think that our board appreciates that because they are all small business owners themselves.
And it helps that you were too, so you understand that. Richard, I would recommend maybe reaching out to Josh personally. Then Richard said he was actually told that he could not be a member with a mobile lounge.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Richard, reach out to Josh after this. You could reach out to him on Facebook, and he'll work with you
Yep.
to get that resolved. Um, so, are you an extensive reader?
I am.
Give us your top book you've read this year, and give us your top 3 books of all time.
That's tough. I've read so many different books. I'm going to take the question in a little bit different
Go ahead,
direction.
take it how you want.
I read a lot of mafia books. I'm
Okay, those are the best.
obsessed with those, in history. I mentioned I wanted to be a history professor. So I read a biography on Joshua Chamberlain, and that's where the mustache is coming, who,
Yep.
he was the colonel on Little Round Top in the Battle of Gettysburg. But I'm reading a lot of books now on Sicily, and like the Mario Puzo stuff. I'm actually going to Sicily this year for the first time in October. And so I have a couple different ones of those. I read some current event books here and there. But my favorite book, if I had to identify one, is probably also my favorite movie, and that's The Godfather.
Okay, that's a great book. Completely. Did you watch the making of the Godfather
Oh yeah.
series?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I didn't realize that Frank Sinatra was that much of a Sally. Like, wow. Okay, I'm not giving it away. For those of you that have not watched the making of the Godfather movie, I think it's like 8 episodes. You will be blown away. The director had his car window shot out. Like, it was a real issue. Definitely go check that out. I forgot what that was called. Um, but it was really, really good. Your whole cigar journey started at Churchill Club, and when you were in college, right?
Yeah,
That's where
Instant.
I was thinking Churchill. So
Yep.
Churchill Club in college. So how has your passion grown and changed for cigars since then? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I think the frequency of cigars has definitely increased. I love trying new things. I'm one of those, when I go to a shop, I always buy something new. I buy something tried and true. And then if they have a shop special blend of their own, I will buy that. So typically I'm a 3 cigar purchaser wherever I go,
Same
even though
here.
I get a ton of free cigars and things that the folks send. But I think that I've advanced a lot. Like my favorite is the dark, earthy Lajero. I do love Mexican San Andreas wrapper, but I mean, I mentioned I was in Honduras last week.
It was called the
We got
Churchill Club, Brent. Churchill Club.
we were at Christian Arroyo's factory and also Rocky Patel Placencia factory, and we got to blend our own cigars.
That's
And
fun.
doing that, like I picked the strongest cigar both time. And the hilarious thing is, I'm like, well, this isn't something that's going to the market. Like I'm going to smoke it. So I want to smoke. And then I smoked it. And the factory manager at Rocky's place was like, what do you think? And I'm like, it's not that strong. I was expecting it stronger. And she was like, oh my gosh, this is pretty strong. Wait until you get that wrapper on it. You're going to like, so I'm like desensitized
Man
to
after my own heart.
the cigar. Like I wanted to punch you in the face. And
Same
like
here.
the hilarious thing too, and when I say I want to be kind of this cigar character in DC, I live in the Navy Yard neighborhood, and our office is on Union Station side. So I have to cross the Capitol walking to work to and from, and I put the biggest lit cigar, walk right across the Capitol both ways. So all the staffers, they have to see this guy. And I take great pride in that. So to me, in the morning, when it's 8 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 7:30, you see this guy in a suit smoking the dark, earthy cigar, like the Alma Fuertes. I'm a huge Padron fan. Like I get asked the question, what's your favorite cigar? I'm unbashful. George Padron knows this. His family knows it. It used to be the 1964 Maduro. Now it's the 1926. So my palate has changed a little bit, but it's still, within that orbit.
So, what is your favorite cut?
Straight cut. There's no other cut.
Okay.
No, I'm joking because we have a lot of accessory companies that do the
Oh yeah.
and the punch cut. It's everyone's preference, but like I get made fun of a lot, being the cigar guy. I will use my finger to cut the cigar.
That's normal. Everybody does that.
And then I am a bargain brand Bic lighter. So I buy them by like the 100.
We gotta get DuPont to give you a PCA light.
So I have them, but I'm worried I'm going to lose those. But like this is not even Bic. It's so cheap because I leave them at hotels and airports and people steal them and all of that stuff. So,
So you use a lot of the soft flame.
Yeah, the soft flame. You asked about my hobbies and stuff.
Yeah.
I would add one more.
Sure.
I travel so much. I always fly through the Miami airport and the TGI Fridays where you can smoke.
Yes. Yes.
Like I'm trying to get them to give me a T-shirt because it says TGI Fridays, Gate D47 Smoking Lounge. I want that T-shirt to wear to the PCA during the casual day, like the last day, because I love that place so much. And whenever I'm flying with other people, I'm like, hey, we got to go to TGI Fridays. And they're like, what? For crappy food or whatnot? And I'm like, it's not that bad, number one, but the fact that you can smoke a cigar in an airport, I just get so excited. And
all you got to do is buy a drink. Yeah, all you got to do is buy a drink. That's it. It's fantastic. You got to fly United though, everybody. If you want to go to the TGIF, I understand it's the United terminal only.
No, American has it. I normally fly in
So
American.
that's a United American terminal. Okay.
Yeah,
so that splits that terminal because they won't let you in if you don't have a plane in that terminal.
Yeah, it's the D. Most of the flights
D
are there. And the other thing that related to airports, Detroit Airport is actually looking to put a cigar bar in the airport. The antis are taking out billboards, and that's something that we're fighting for so that people would able to get that. Imagine being able to have a full cigar bar food drink experience inside an airport, a major hub like Detroit nonetheless.
Now I am going to ask you a really geeky DC political confirmation question that I'm curious if you know. Who is the only justice, Supreme Court justice in modern history, since we'll say 90, 88, 90, to ever smoke during their confirmation? And what did they smoke?
I don't know what they smoked, but I want to say it was Antonin Scalia.
What did he smoke?
I don't know.
He lit
I
up a
don't.
pipe right in the middle
Oh,
of Congress while he
yeah.
was doing his confirmation. Again, talk about how the world has fucking changed, right? Because Barack Obama infamously said he smoked in the White House. Everybody smoked in the White House. There's smoking rooms, infamously smoking rooms in the White House. So, sorry, that was just a little geeky question. I
Well,
was just curious. That was one of my favorite confirmations.
we do a
Scalia was great.
we do a congressional cigar caucus event, and we smoke on the speaker's balcony once a quarter. And that's one of the coolest things. We do. There are members of Congress in their individual offices that still allow smoking. I actually was there with a couple people in a congressman's office that was cigar friendly. I won't name who it was, but we actually set off the fire alarm, and the Capitol Police had to come in, and it was kind of comical. If I write a book, there'll be a passage about that.
Now we all know that Trump doesn't smoke, but if Don Jr. said, "Come light a cigar with me in Lincoln Room" or whatever, would you do it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, and I know that the White House Chief of Staff was talking about putting a cigar patio on the White House. But Don Jr. he's a big Gurkha fan.
Big.
Uh, and Eric Trump also smokes, and to my knowledge, the Trump golf course that's in Northern Virginia, they just set up cigar lockers. So like their businesses are cigar friendly. Yeah, the president doesn't smoke, but a lot of his team does, and
Cash
it's one of
Patel.
those things where like I like the cool political history in the moment, and I do it on a bipartisan basis. So like, I was able to go to Camp David this actually last year under President Biden, and I was able to smoke a cigar at Camp David, and that was a unforgettable experience. So any of those cool things, I would never say no to the ability. If we got an invite to have a cigar on the White House grounds, absolutely would do it.
What's one of the biggest perks and what is the biggest misconceptions of your job?
That we sit around and just smoke cigars all day, and
Oh, wait a second. That's not true. No, I'm just joking.
don't yeah that we don't do any work. Biggest, the biggest perk is that while we're working and writing policy memos and press releases and doing this, our office is a cigar lounge, so you really do feel like Winston Churchill. Like I'm sitting there in all of these meetings, and like unless it's an official government meeting, like if it's another association or even sometimes staffers, like I will always suggest doing the meeting at our office because I don't want to go to a non-smoking meeting. Like that's the biggest perk of like when you're doing work, you are allowed to smoke.
Now, is another perk you being able to get access to any lounge you want to go to in the country because you're in PCA? Meaning
Yeah,
like the private lounges and stuff like that?
everybody's been pretty good. If we're in town, I don't over abuse that privilege. Like a lot of times I will just show up and like I will buy cigars because if I went and said, I'm with the PCA, I'm, the executive director, they would say, oh, here's a free cigar. And that's not my intention. I
No, of
want to
course not.
support their business. So a lot of times I kind of do the undercover shopper, and then midway I'll let them know, hey, I'm Josh with the Premium Cigar Association. And they give me a lot of candid feedback, and doing it that way, I
I'm
think is
sure they
better
do.
than setting up a organized appointment. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely perks of being able to host an event too, pretty much anywhere in the country that's a cigar friendly event, because we have lounge members everywhere.
Absolutely. And Richard, if you go to the PCA office, please wear the Rocky Mountain Cigar Show T-shirt. It'll get you guaranteed access. I can tell you that right now. All you gotta do is open the door. um, so, what is your favorite wrapper of a cigar, or musician, or both? It doesn't matter. Whatever's up to you.
Favorite wrapper of a cigar, and then favorite wrapper.
If you want, I've had some people started giving me both, so I just throw the question out there. You give both, give one, but the question originally is around what's your favorite cigar wrapper?
So I'll just give you both. Mexican San Andreas wrapper, and in terms of a musical rapper, Bad Bunny, who is a reggaeton rapper,
Yep.
Spanish rapper. I don't speak any Spanish, but I love his music, and especially when I go to the Dominican Republic or Nicaragua or Honduras, whenever I'm going to a Spanish-speaking country, I just listen to that nonstop. Great music for the gym, but also I went to a Bad Bunny concert here in DC, and funny story with that, because I don't speak any Spanish, I joke that I'm the biggest gringo. I thought it was a Modelo commercial in the middle of the concert. I was like getting ready to leave, or like intermission, and part of the show, and I thought it was a beer commercial. So,
Hey, I'm as white as they come. I can't pronounce half of these brands and lines of cigars. El Guince, you know how long it took Nick to teach me how to say that fucking brand? Yes, Richard. Josh, I'd love to send you a shirt if you'd be willing to have one. We'll trade for the cigar for the shirt. I would love to see you wear it. Um, and so two last questions of the night. One being, what is your favorite pairing? Since you brought up pairings in the show.
so I'm a firm believer of what goes together grows together. So like me, it's dark black coffee, espresso with a cigar. Like I don't want to. I don't want anything to detract from it. If it's going to be in the spirit category, I actually am a fan of tequila. So like higher quality sipping tequila.
Well, you own a tequila bar. I would hope you were a fan. And then last question, two-parter. Part of this is a question I stole from James Lipton on Inside the Actor Studio, but I just love the self-reflection of it. But it's a two-part. One, how do you want the cigar industry to remember you when you're done and gone? And two, what do you want to hear your creator, whatever it is and whoever it is you believe in, say to you when you meet them?
Whew, these are two interesting questions. I think with the cigar industry, I want to be known as an unbashful defender of the industry that really took the PCA to new heights. Um, you know, I think a brand owner that has recently got into the industry um, said it best, and that's Conor McGregor and Notorious Cigars. I'm not here to take part; I'm here to take over, but I'm here to take over with everybody. And and in doing so, it's a team effort. The PCA is ready to take over. I think that youthful swagger, as we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
not treading on arrogance, again, respecting tradition, respecting legacy, but coming at it full bore. Um, I think that we're going to be able to achieve great things. I'm fortunate to have a team behind me. But here in DC and our members, I hope they know that I have an unfledging um, will to see this industry succeed. And I'm going to do everything possible that I can and work tirelessly to do that. My my creator, when I meet the creator, I think I'm going to hopefully, because of that life and that life in this industry, uh, the creator will ask me, what's my first cigar in heaven?
What will you say?
Padron 1926 Maduro.
And
If they don't have Padron, I'm going back down.
I would be remiss without asking this, but I lied. I do this all the time. I'm the biggest Columbo. One more famous historical character. Don't say Jesus or a family member that you would like to, or Winston Churchill that you would like to smoke a cigar with, and what would it be?
Historical character,
Alive or dead? It doesn't matter.
alive or dead. What would I smoke? I think it would honestly, there's one that I would say in the entertainment industry that would be really cool to have a cigar. Frank Sinatra. I'm a
Okay.
huge Sinatra fan. Also Marlon Brando. I would smoke a Tatuaje with him because he,
Oh, I don't know what he would know what to do with a Tatuaje. That'd blow his socks off.
I think that would be really cool. But like
Yeah.
historical figure, like it's weird because working in politics, I don't get like starstruck by modern politicians. So it would have to be a historical politician. And I think that George Patton
Mhm.
would be the one that, I mentioned that Sicily tour, it's twofold to do the Godfather tour,
Yep.
also kind of trace Patton's footsteps during the Italian campaign. And he was a cigar smoker.
Big
So
time.
I'm pretty sure he was a Cuban cigar smoker. I won't hold that against him.
Everybody was back then.
But, I think for that one, it would have to be like a more mild cigar than what I'm used to, even though he's a big personality. But I would probably go with some type of Opus X, maybe a Opus Blue.
Okay, okay. Well, Josh, this has been a lot of fun tonight. Thank you for going down my rabbit trail of questions. I hope I gave you some new stuff that you haven't been asked before. I actually did a little bit of research for the show, which is rare. I normally just wing it, but I wanted to make sure I was doing you justice and not asking you repetitive questions that I know a lot of other shows or people asked you. So I hope I gave you something new with coming on tonight. And I hope you had a great time as well.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you very much for being a part of the show and for doing what you do in the industry. And like I said, I'm a firm believer that your youthfulness in the cigar in running the PCA will be incredibly beneficial. I think it's great to get some of the older dogs out. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but a fresh vision and a fresh view from a different generation, I think oftentimes helps build up an industry and puts a fresh perspective on it. So is great to have such a young guy like you literally running the most important industry inside the cigar world, offering that vision that you bring that's outside of the industry, that's a little bit different viewpoint, and that's really much appreciated. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for coming on tonight. You always are welcome back, and I hope you choose to come back as often as you want to. Uh,
Absolutely. Well, and
every,
if you're ever in DC, we want to host you at the townhouse, and you have an invitation to the trade show next year. I hope you'll join me, and really appreciate. I had a great time. Your questions were phenomenal. I think we covered a lot of ground, and hopefully the listeners and viewers got a little bit of better sense of what PCA is about and kind of what our stances are on something.
I think they did, and I think you were very open and honest with a lot of direct questions, and I really appreciate that. And you didn't give a political answer, which I really appreciate too. You didn't try to scapegoat anybody or put blame on anything. You hit the questions head on, and that's much appreciated. So, hope everybody had a great time watching the show tonight. And until we see you again, smoke what you like, smoke as often as you can, and have a great rest of your week. Bye, everyone. Oh, by the way, if you haven't noticed on the ticker below, there's a new sponsor of the show, La Casa Grande Cigars, who also makes Martin Cove and Chaz Palminteri cigars. So big big shout out to Paulie over at La Casa Grande. Thank you very much for supporting the show. So until we see you again, smoke what you like, smoke as often as you can, and have a great, great rest of your